I'm Representative David French from the 40th District, representing Watch Kansas tonight. And I'm with Dave Buehler, who is running for that seat this year, as I'm retiring and getting out of the legislature. Dave, I know you've been out knocking on doors and talking to your future constituents, and I think what you've learned, at least I think you've learned, is that most people are really concerned about the inflation right now. You cannot go to fill up your car, you can't go to the grocery store, you can't go out to eat without seeing the prices just skyrocketing out of control. And for most of us, our salaries or our income isn't going up nearly fast enough to cover it. So I think we need to, I think a lot of it has to do with government spending, especially at the federal level. After COVID, we saw so much money being dumped on the economy that it's overheated our economy to a degree that the debt is just basically killing our economy. So I'm not sure how much we can do at the state level, but I know there's some things we can do to try to control government spending, even at the state level. And so I'd kind of like you to maybe talk about what you can do at the state level to help this inflation, in spite of the fact that most of it's being caused by the federal government. And you can talk about that too.
Sure. So I think the way I would position this is it's first off, let's take a look at what the classic definition of inflation is. It's too much money chasing too few goods. And as you mentioned, David, when you look at the American Recovery Act or all the other programs that the federal government has dumped into the economy over the last 2+ years, we have a predictable outcome.
Absolutely.
When you pump that much money into the economy, what's going to happen is record level inflation. So that's one side of it. There is another side though that impacts, or Kansas plays a part in, and if you look at, and again it started at the federal level, but there's an impact in the state, and that is the war on fossil fuels. So first part of the Biden administration, they declared war on the fossil fuel industry. And I look around at the clothes I'm wearing, the clothes you're wearing, the shirts, the clothes, whatever, are made with petroleum-based products. We look at the asphalt that goes on our streets. We look at the power that it takes to heat and cool homes. We look at the fuel that we put in our car. We look at the fertilizers that our farmers are putting on their fields and their crops to raise food for us. All of those things, when you declare war on the fossil fuel industry, it choked the supply down. They canceled leases and those kind of things. But the result was very predictable. And when you add the government spending to the war on fossil fuels, we have inflation levels that we haven't seen since Jimmy Carter was president. And it was perfectly predictable. Anybody who thinks that it's somebody else's fault needs to look at those two things. This was a self-inflicted wound. So for us, then it is, okay, what do you do about it? So in Kansas, we are a large producer of natural gas and petroleum in the petroleum industry. We need to make sure that when the first thing is, and let's put spending aside, we need to make sure that the regulations that are affecting those businesses and those industry are as least restrictive as possible, that they promote the spirit of capitalism, and that they promote businesses to be able to do their jobs as efficiently as possible and produce the products. When you do that, then businesses have an opportunity to reduce the costs that are subsequently passed on to consumers. That's a big one. Second thing is, we have to look at expenditures at all levels, but let's focus on the state. And we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but there are ways to reduce spending. You have to establish what your priorities are, and you have to look at it in the big picture. This is the balanced budget. This is where we're going to impact or affect Kansans' lives the most. Those are the things that we have to do. One of the other things that we've talked about is the proposal to eliminate retiree incomes, taxes on retirees' income. Those are a combination of things that we can do to make this problem more palatable. The challenge will be is that there's no, again, this is one of those things where there's not a silver bullet or a magic fix that we can turn on overnight, but we have to have the discipline to work within ourselves to make those things happen, because they will. They'll get better over time if we do that. And then I would say this, I think we have to look at who caused the problem, and when I would challenge all voters, recognize that when you go to the polls in the fall, that what we're seeing inflation was caused by one party, and it was a self-inflicted wound. And we can fix that, and we can fix it at the polls. That's what I would say is the first step.
And you talk about the other side, and they are all for this developing alternative forms of energy, and the idea that they can replace fossil fuels within a certain time frame. And you just mentioned the fact that right now we use fossil fuels for just about everything, and so we're not going to replace fossil fuels. And if we do, we need to do it intelligently, you know, and with proper research. So I think you would agree that. What's your opinion about the
Green New Deal?
Well, maybe not the Green New Deal, but just the availability and the possibilities of alternative fuel means.
Good question. So today, less than 2% of the power that's created in this country comes from wind and solar, and those are the two sources that's touted by the current administration as the road to the transition. Technically, it's not feasible to use just those two sources to replace fossil fuels. It's not possible. So I'm not saying that doesn't mean we shouldn't look for cleaner, greener sources of energy. We should include all, whether it's petroleum, natural gas, wind, solar, nuclear. That becomes a strategic energy independence plan, and that's what I believe in and what I would support. To just champion solar and wind as the way to the transition to the next source of energy is scientifically not possible at this point. It's not scientifically possible. So let's get behind and get together on an energy independence goal, and let's look at all of those sources of fuel that makes the best sense for America and the best sense for Kansas. We will all be better off if we do that.
I totally agree with you, and I think that's key. We need to have the full toolbox of energy sources to make our lives as comfortable as we can, and so we can't just push one off and say we don't need it. We need to look at everything. I totally agree. We don't need to just say, no, we're stuck with fossil fuels forever. There's other ways, nuclear, you know, there's just so many other ways we could get power, but we can't just say, no, we're going to eliminate one of our tools out of our toolbox. That just makes no sense at all, especially right now when it's the primary way we get our energy.
Like inflation, that would be another self-inflicted gunshot.
It would.
Yeah.
You know, I talked to you before about the fact that I ran initially because of taxes. Our taxes were so high. And part of that was that our taxes were too high because the government spending was out of control in the state. And so I went to Topeka to basically try to cut taxes. Well, I have to admit tonight that I failed miserably. The 4 years I was in Topeka, every year we set a new spending record in the state. I don't know if that was my fault particularly. I don't think it was, because I was definitely looking for ways to cut spending, but it was definitely the fault of a tax and spend governor who just, every budget she submitted to us was several $100 million more. And eventually, you start adding that much to the budget, then guess what? You come back to the taxpayer and they have to pay for the bill. So I hope you're more successful than I've been in cutting the spending. There is a lot of spending at the state level we can cut. And so Dave, when you get there next year, for all of our sakes, I hope you can do something with the budgets.
I will do that. I will also, I'm going to try to quote Ronald Reagan here. The 9 most feared words in the English language. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. We need to recognize that government in and of itself is an inefficient way to do business. There's no incentive for the government to be efficient. We must elect people who are charged with making our government efficient. That's the only way we're going to get there. So, and I will do my best, David.
Very well said. Thank you very much, Dave, for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks.